Hello, everybody. I just admitted everybody into the waiting room, and there are more people joining the waiting room, so there'll be more people joining all the time. This is the Tuleyome Nature and You lecture series. Everybody comes in defaulted with the sound off, and generally it's good to have your video off as well, but we'll be talking about that in a second. So I'm going to start. Oh,
Bill, sorry, I just wanted to unmute and say
David.
hi, Bill, and hi, Alex.
Hi, it's nice to see you. It's been
Likewise.
so long.
There's a good contingent from Splash here tonight to see you, Alex.
Yay!
Well,
I'm excited.
welcome all you splashers.
Yep. So I'm gonna shut my video off and mute myself here.
Okay, thanks.
You could go to the chat.
So I'm going to start off by telling everybody a little bit about Tuleyome, and I hope everybody knows about Tuleyome already. But if you don't, we are a conservation-oriented nonprofit based in Woodland. Our focus is the area close to us. So we're a local nonprofit that works with the inner northern coastal range. So in general, it's the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument area. So if you're in the Sacramento Valley or you're in the Davis, Woodland, Yolo County area, it's the mountains to the northwest. So a lot of that area up in Lake County, a lot of our stuff is in Lake County, Napa County. That's the area we're really concerned with. So we're interested in conserving that. We are also interested in people just enjoying the land and getting to know that area. So we lead hikes, we lead trail building, we actually purchase land. We kind of advocate for enjoying that area, which is a pretty unknown area in California. We also do a lot of education stuff. So we do this lecture series. During normal times, we have field trips we do with kids to take them out into areas close to Davis and Woodland and Yolo County, as well as in Lake County. Even during the COVID times, we are starting to do some hikes again, so appropriately social distance. And if you go to our website and you go to the events page, it's where you went to sign up for this, you'll see that there are some hikes and some trail building sessions. We are going to keep them really small during COVID, but there is still an opportunity to get outside. So with that, I'm going to introduce Alex. Alex is a herpetologist, and she's with the U.S. Geological Survey. And I'm going to let her introduce herself the rest of the way. Thank you very much. Oh, thanks everybody for coming for one, and thank you, Alex, for doing this for us.
All right, well, thank you so much. I'm super excited to see Luann and David here and all the rest of the people from Sac Splash. And I'm always happy to be in the great virtual company of a bunch of turtle lovers. So let me share my screen here so you guys can see my starter slide. Okay, let's see if I can so I can view the chat. Ooh. I don't think it's gonna let me view the chat when I'm in presenter mode. Do you have experience with that?
I don't know of a way to do that. I can watch the chat. If there's something that's really needed to, I can interrupt you if you don't mind.
Yeah, totally. Go for it.
So you guys go ahead and ask questions in the chat during the thing, and we'll, if it's appropriate, I'll interrupt Alex and we'll get them answered.
Yeah, that sounds good. And like was mentioned, we'll definitely have a question and answer section afterwards. I don't claim to have all the answers in the world, but I'll definitely try, and I love hearing questions, even if I don't know the answer. I am definitely going to be around to stick around and chat about stuff afterwards. So, like he mentioned, I work for the U.S. Geological Survey. I'm located in Woodland right now. That's where I live. I work in Dixon, though right now our field season is over and I'm teleworking, so I'm in Woodland all the time. The two people that I've worked most closely with this turtle work on has been Jonathan Rose and Brian Halstead. They're also listed on this as well. So to start out with, I'm going to do a little bit of introduction with myself and some of my background. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about Western pond turtles, a little bit about red-eared sliders, and then I'm going to be moving into our turtle work at USGS, kind of talking about where we work, how we do, and then a specific distribution and occupancy study that we did of the Northwestern pond turtle and red-eared sliders in the Sacramento Valley and the Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta. Okay, so turtles, turtles, turtles. I absolutely love turtles, like hopefully most of you here. So I have been very lucky that I've gotten to work with a variety of turtles in different locations. So I'm actually not from California. I'm a Midwesterner. I'm from Iowa myself. And then I went to school at the University of Minnesota where I got my degree in wildlife biology. And I've done what's called teching, which many of you are probably familiar with, where you move around and work different places, get different experiences. So my first time where I ever worked with turtles, I'm so young here, but that was in Minnesota. I was volunteering for the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, working with primarily soft-shell turtles, which are fabulous creatures if anybody's ever seen any of them. That really, I was already into herps, and that really, kind of piqued my interest in working with turtles. And then I actually got to work with hawksbill sea turtles in the Eastern Caribbean for a summer, which was actually my first wildlife internship, which needless to say was definitely a dream and a fabulous experience. Then after I graduated college, I went to live in Missouri for a while, and I was working for the Missouri Department of Conservation with a couple fabulous species, alligator snapping turtles, which is actually my favorite turtle ever. They're absolutely fantastic, trapping for those in really, kind of swampy areas, and then also working with box turtles. And here I find myself in California, working with none other than the Western pond turtle. All right, so the Western pond turtle range, they've actually been divided into two separate species. So what we have in our direct area is the Northwestern pond turtle. You can see that on the left side of the screen. It goes all the way up into Washington and a little bit in Canada. On the right side is the Southwestern pond turtle, which is more of the Central Coast down into Baja. So technically what we have here is the Northwestern pond turtle, but I'm just going to be referring to it as the Western pond turtle for shorthand. And you're going to see throughout the presentation the abbreviation WPT for Western pond turtle, and then likewise RES for red-eared slider. So a little bit of life history about Western pond turtles. So the habitat that they live in, they are very good at being generalists. They live and do quite well in a wide variety of habitats. So this can include natural ponds, but also stock ponds, wetlands, lakes, streams, rivers, irrigation canals, wastewater treatment plants. As long as there's water for a decent period of time, they can actually do pretty well. One thing that's unique about them is they remain at low elevations. You don't find them high up in the mountains. So sea level, like around here, they do pretty well, up to generally no more than 6,000 feet. So their diet is interesting, and they actually eat primarily different food than most people would expect. You would expect these guys to be swimming around eating, primarily fish, but actually the majority of their diet is aquatic invertebrates. So a lot of like bug larvae, worms, crayfish, and then also plant matter. But they are pretty opportunistic, and they will absolutely eat other things. They will eat carrion, they will eat, the fish, the tadpoles, the frogs, but they aren't the main part of the diet. You can see on the lower right hand, that is a bunch of crayfish that we caught in our giant garter snake traps at work. I'll get to what those traps look like more a little bit later. So for breeding, the youngest known sexually mature Western pond turtle is 4 years old, but for Western pond turtles and turtles in general, their sexual maturity is related more to size than age. It depends on the environment that they're living in, how fast they grow, and that is, reptiles in general. They lay eggs from May to July, and they have a pretty small average clutch size, 4 to 9 eggs. In Northern California, they're laying one clutch per year. And then when the young hatch out, they actually overwinter in the nest and then come out in the spring. In areas where it's warmer, you know, Southern California, Baja, sometimes the turtles do lay 2 clutches per year. So what do they do in the winter? So they brumate or estivate during the winter or even during prolonged periods of drought. And they're pretty generalist with this. It really depends on the environment. They can go underwater, they can bury in the mud or in the mud under the water. They've even been known in the summer to estivate upland underground. I've seen pictures before of, you know, kind of a seasonal stream and uplands and western pond turtle kind of buried in the leaf litter and duff, just hiding out. They do have sexual dimorphism, like many reptiles. So this right here that we're looking at is a female. So there are a lot of subtle cues that you can look at with western pond turtles to tell them apart, such as the shape of the carapace and plastron and things like that. But these are the 2 features that I personally think are the easiest if you haven't seen a whole bunch of western pond turtles to tell them apart, and that's tail length and their throat on adults. So the lower picture is a female. You can see she's got a yellow throat with kind of some darker patches. That's very characteristic of what a typical adult female throat is gonna look like. And then in the upper right-hand corner, you see a picture of a tail. The cloaca there extends in a female to or just past the edge of the shell there, and they have a much smaller tail. This is a male. So in the upper left-hand corner, while it's fresh in our minds, let's look at the tail here and compare it to the female. So you see it's just a bigger tail and the cloaca extends a lot further down. That's because they have their reproductive organs in their tail. And when mating with the female, the tail has to kind of be able to reach around underneath the female. So it's just got to be a little bit bigger. And then in the lower right hand is a picture of the underside of the male's throat. They have more of a, you know, creamy yellow, smooth, not a ton of modeling. Again, there's always exceptions to the rule, but this is very typically what you're going to see in an adult male versus an adult female. So I can't talk about turtles without doing a little bit of a public service announcement. So as I mentioned, this is all my work with the U.S. Geological Survey, but I also in my free time serve on the board of the Northern California Herpetological Society, and I'm on the list for getting the calls about turtles and tortoises, and I get many, many calls every year about, help, I found a turtle, what do I do? And a big thing that I always tell people is, if you love it, leave it. And that's very true when it comes to western pond turtles. A lot of people rescue turtles when they really don't need rescued. So turtles definitely can and do travel. That's okay, that's part of their natural life. They, you know, look for new areas to move into. They look for places to lay eggs. They're searching for mates. Just because they're in a small pond or body of water doesn't mean they're gonna be there forever. And that's totally natural and fine. Just because you find a turtle out and about and it's not in water doesn't mean that it's at risk. They can actually travel pretty long distances. So the turtle usually knows what it's doing. Us as a human, not so much. So the best course of action if you find one out and about is just, you know, leave it to go about its way. That said, if you find one in a seriously dangerous place, it's okay to move it out of immediate danger. Such as if you find one in the middle of a highway or middle of a road that's, you know, really busy. It's okay to, you know, move it just off the road so it doesn't get hit. But I can't tell you how many times I've gotten pictures of somebody who actually brought a western pond turtle home. I've got a picture of them sitting on someone's kitchen counter, and I just say, put it back, you know, take it back exactly where you found it and put it there immediately. So the best thing that we can do as lovers of turtles and lovers of nature is to just, you know, leave them be, and definitely encourage people. If you're ever in a situation where somebody's wondering if they should grab a western pond turtle or not, you know, educate them, encourage them to just, you know, leave it be, let them go about their thing. And a note on, if you do ever help a turtle cross the road, you always want to help it going in the direction that it's going. Even if it doesn't look like the direction that it's going is the best choice. You know, sometimes it's not as nice on the other side where they're headed to. Turtles are stubborn. If you take them in the wrong direction, they're just going to turn around and go right back. So you want to help them out of danger, not make them be in that danger twice. All right, so Western pond turtles versus red-eared sliders. This is a question that I get a lot. And unfortunately, if you don't have the turtle in hand, it can be extremely difficult to tell them apart. Here at USGS, we actually don't count turtle sightings as verified unless we have a turtle in hand. What happens a lot, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with that, is you're out and about and you see a turtle head pop up in the water, or you're walking and you see a turtle on a log and it flushes off really quickly and you don't get a great view of it. There are so many things that are similar with these two species, Western pond turtles being our only native turtle in this area, and red-eared sliders being an extremely, worldwide invasive turtle, just absolutely everywhere. But I definitely caution to not get too confident because they can mix it up. So Western pond turtle on the left here is they're a lot more bland. They're pretty, they're good at camouflage. They're pretty muted colors. There's nothing too terribly jazzy about them. The red-eared slider can definitely have really bright colors. They're called red-eared sliders because they have that red stripe that you see there, but not every red-eared slider has that red stripe. It's actually not terribly uncommon for them to be melanistic and either be born without that red stripe, or a lot of what happens is as turtles age, they just kind of lose their coloring. So I find red-eared sliders out and about that have no red at all, you wouldn't be able to tell. So if you're somewhere and you can see the side of the turtle's head and there's no red, that doesn't always mean that it's not a red-eared slider. It just might be a really old one or, an otherwise melanistic one. This is personally my favorite way to identify a Western pond turtle versus a red-eared slider, and this is the back of the shell. So on the other side would be the head, and this is like the butt of the turtle. The tail would be coming out the middle there. On the left-hand side, you see the Western pond turtle is really smooth. They're nice and smooth on that back edge, and that is a really great indicator. The red-eared slider is more serrated, and this is, in my experience, no matter what the coloration's what's going on, this is a really surefire way to help you tell them apart. The babies are a little bit easier. Most of the time, the red-eared slider babies look exactly like the one on the right. They're very, very vivid. They're super adorable. They have a bright red stripe. They're, green and yellow, kind of swirled and blotched. They're really cute. The ones on the left-hand side, the Western pond turtles, are even more cute if I don't say so myself. And they're just more muted in body color. They're, you're gonna be looking at browns, yellows, just a little bit more dull. They have really long tails too. I mean, look at how long that tail is for that little baby turtle. They're super long. The red-eared slider, they're always gonna have these stubbier little tails. And just in general, the red-eared sliders have shorter tails than Western pond turtles, but it's especially evident in the babies. Odds are you're probably not going to come across a baby. They're very difficult to detect. They're really good at hiding. The only reason I get to see them is because we catch them in our minnow traps with our work at USGS on the giant garter snake project. But if you do ever encounter one, the babies are a little bit easier to tell apart. Okay, so shifting to just Western pond turtle gear, I wanted to give a brief timeline so everyone's just kind of aware of what the listing status and how that's going for Western pond turtles. So in 1991, they were first proposed for listing on the Endangered Species Act. And then a year later, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service determined that it wasn't warranted for them to be listed on the Endangered Species Act. A couple years later, in 1994, they were designated as a species of special concern in California specifically, and they are still a species of special concern in the state. In 2012, they were petitioned once again for listing on the Endangered Species Act. And then in 2014, a really awesome paper came out that supported dividing them into 2 separate species. So that's what I was talking about earlier with the range maps. We have the Northwestern pond turtle, which is us, what this presentation is about. And then you also have the Southwestern pond turtle. In 2015, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service announced that it would undergo a full review for listing for Western pond turtle, and today that listing continues. And that's a big reason why we have started doing Western pond turtle work at our USGS office and at the Dixon Field Station, is to be able to help provide information, because at this stage, any information that we can learn and understand about Western pond turtles helps to better inform those sorts of decisions. All right. So why is it important to understand Western pond turtle distribution in the Sacramento Valley and the Delta? So, like I just mentioned, help inform that U.S. Fish and Wildlife listing decision. Where are Western pond turtles? We studied areas where they were not previously studied to help fill in some of those knowledge gaps, and to try to learn more about how they're using both the nice restored wetlands and then also the agricultural landscape, which there's a whole lot of in this area. And why do we care about understanding where red-eared sliders are, both in the Sacramento Valley and the Delta? Well, we don't even have a great idea of what their current range is. There hasn't been a lot of research done on red-eared sliders. We don't totally understand where they're overlapping with Western pond turtles and if or how that might be a problem, what habitats they're using. It's just something that we don't have a lot of information about right now. Okay. So I love maps. I've got a lot of maps in here. So this is where we did our study. So in 2018, we started researching Western pond turtles for the first time. And we focused on the Sacramento Valley. So all of the white dots are where we trapped for Western pond turtles in 2018. So we're kind of, you know, Sacramento, north of Woodland, and then all the way up past Yuba City, kind of to like the Gridley area. And then in 2019, those are the really dark gray dots. That is in the Delta where we trap for turtles. I have the different colors in here. This is how we divide things up for my work, is by groundwater subbasin. So all of the different colors are the different groundwater subbasins. And we trapped, this is 142 different locations. Okay, so these are the exact same locations that we were looking at before, but now we're looking at them in habitat type. So north, we're all in irrigation canals up there. It's not that there isn't restored wetlands or wetlands in general, it's just not where our study areas were. So in the northern, we have all these irrigation canals. North of Sacramento area, we are trapping in a lot of wetlands, a lot of them restored, and some interspersed irrigation canals that are nearby them. And then down in the Delta, you have more of a mixed bag. We have more of an equal distribution of wetlands versus irrigation canals. And then one habitat of a tidal slough, which I have to say provided some unique challenges with some, you know, dealing with tide, some really shifting water levels and trying to throw traps out there. Okay, so I'm gonna show a few pictures of the sort of habitat that we're trapping in the Sacramento Valley. Most of us, I'm sure, are living in the Sacramento Valley right now and are familiar with it, but the areas that we are trapping in are not areas that people might always see unless you're seeking them out, which is primarily the irrigation canals in rice fields. So just to get a visual of the areas that we're trapping at, rice field irrigation canals can vary in many, many ways. You have absolutely huge ones like this, these really big delivery canals that are almost like rivers. I mean, they retain water all year round. They have a lot of different diversity in them. And then there's also really, really narrow ones. You can see the Sutter Buttes in the background. This is up in Colusa County. You know, something like this that's really narrow, that's only going to retain water for, you know, a short period of time in the summer. And everything in between, you know, we have ones that are kind of medium-sized. We have ones that are absolutely covered in invasive azolla. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, that nice, stinky, thick red stuff. Some of them have really good emergent vegetation like this. This is a restored wetland that has a lot of tule. And then another restored wetland. It's got the red invasive azolla, unfortunately, and primrose. I don't know if people are familiar with that. That stuff is very prevalent. Okay, so then I wanted to show some pictures too of the Sacramento San Joaquin River Delta. Most of the habitats that we're trapping in look very similar. The irrigation canals look very much the same. The restored wetlands look very much the same, but it's more the surrounding habitat that's a lot different. So in the Sacramento Valley, the surrounding habitat is almost always rice fields. Rice is the predominant form of agriculture up here. It's, you know, everywhere. In the Sacramento San Joaquin River Delta, it's more dry crops. You have, you know, corn, alfalfa, hay, orchards, stuff like that. So you can see this picture, instead of rice fields, we have an orchard in the background. And, you know, stuff like this where it's an irrigation canal, but corn on the side. You know, got a lot of the primrose here. This is a really, you know, big one, actually has some trees. That's pretty rare for us. You know, again, narrow ones with dry crops on both sides. Again, more corn. I kind of felt at home being a Midwesterner there. Completely choked out. You know, this happens in the Sacramento Valley too. The primrose comes in and just absolutely chokes everything out. And then a pretty nice wetland. So as I mentioned, we started trapping for the first time in 2018, and we were able to kind of learn from our experiences and tweak our methods a little bit in 2019. So in 2018, we used two different styles of turtle traps. On the right-hand side, you see a big one. It's 2.5 feet wide for the diameter. And on the left-hand side, you see a smaller one. It's, I think, about 20 inches wide. And you can see the kind of rear ends of the traps are kind of higher than the mouth of the trap. And that was because we're dealing with, everywhere that we work, with fluctuating water levels. So the wetlands that we trap in are primarily managed and kind of tend to go up and down a little bit. Same thing with the irrigation canals. So those can have a little bit more drastic of fluctuations. And we had really good luck with having them angled, but we did find a better solution, which I'll show you in a second, in 2019 that we practiced. One interesting thing that we did in 2018 was we tested bait types. So we tested dry cat food compared with sardines and soybean oil. And at every site, we either did 2 of the large traps or 2 of the small traps. And we did them not right next to each other, but within a reasonable proximity that we were surveying the same general area. And we set one with sardines and one with dry cat food, and we wanted to see which one worked better. It definitely turned out that sardines was a better choice. There have been some turtle studies that have used cat food before and have found that it's really effective and sometimes more effective. And there hadn't been any study looking at that with the Western pond turtles. So we wanted to give it a go, because if cat food turned out to be more effective, it's a lot easier to work with and a lot cheaper. But the kind of standard turtle bait that everyone seems to use, sardines, did do the trick a little bit better. So we're able to take that information and employ it for 2019. So in 2019, we only used sardines. Because of this, we were able to space the traps further apart because we weren't directly comparing bait anymore. So we were able to kind of put the traps, I would say like 300 meters to 1 kilometer apart. And we were able to use one big trap and one small trap at every location. And then we have the lovely pool noodles there that we were able to use. The pool noodles were really helpful. We were able to kind of thread them along the PVC, and the trap is able to then float up and down on the metal conduit there. So one thing that we did find is that red-eared sliders were more likely to be detected in the large traps compared to the small ones. We don't know why that is, and we definitely look forward to researching that with both red-eared sliders and Western pond turtles more as we continue our trapping to try to figure out what trap type is the best to target each species. So, as I have alluded to before, giant garter snake traps are something that we are able to use. So all of this work happened in conjunction with giant garter snake trapping. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with this, but the USGS, based out of Dixon, California, has been trapping giant garter snakes in the Sacramento Valley for a really long time. As of September 30th, we just completed our 26th year of researching giant garter snakes. And in that time, we have been able to really hone and figure out what traps work the best for that, and that is those pictured right here. One of the great things about our turtle research is it has been something that we've been able to add on fairly easily to our giant garter snake traps. So we trap with these giant garter snake traps every year throughout the Sacramento Valley. We do 50 of these traps in a line generally, or weaving through a wetland. We do usually 20 meters apart if possible. So we are already in all of these areas that most people don't go to and that aren't very researched in the, we almost exclusively trap on private land. We already have the permissions, we're all of these places. So we were able to, without too much difficulty, get additional permission to start trapping Western pond turtles there because we're there already, and that is fantastic extra information to have. So all of the locations that we trap are also places that we trap for giant garter snakes. So we're already there, we're able to trap for turtles, and one of the really cool things is we actually catch baby turtles in these traps. It's extremely difficult to catch baby turtles, and we've been able to get some cool information about not only where turtles are, but where they're actually breeding. Okay, so we mark both Western pond turtles and red-eared sliders. We use different methods on babies versus the adults. On the left-hand side, you see a little baby Western pond turtle, and it's marked with a dot of nail polish in the lower costal scoot there. We're only at our giant garter snake trap lines for about 3 weeks. So the little mark of nail polish retains quite well during that period of time. So we're not able to tell if we get different turtles, but we can at least tell that we're not just getting the same turtle over and over and measuring them. So we're getting measurements on unique turtles. On the right-hand side, you see a Western pond turtle. We mark their scoot with a triangular file, which sounds really brutal, but it's really not bad. Their shell is made out of keratin, just like our fingernails. I've never had a Western pond turtle bleed. When I do this, you just kind of file it down and it makes a really distinct notch. Especially because their shells are very smooth. It's easy to see that little divot in, and they actually retain very well over time. This is the marking code that we use. So I'm trying to move my bar so I can see it. So this turtle would actually be number, so let's see. So you go down to the thousands and you do 4,000 plus 2,000, so that's 6,000. And then it'd be 400 plus 100, so that's 6,500. 20 plus 10 is 30. 1 plus 2 is 3. So we have 6,532 would be the number for this turtle. Luckily, most of them are not that difficult. We started, my cat's coming to say hi. We started at number 1 and stop and are going up. So most of them aren't that difficult, but it's a really unique additive code. And the reason that we use this is so you don't have to mark the sides there. It can just be more difficult to mark those sides, and they don't tend to retain as well. Let's see if I can get to my next slide. Okay, so this is a map of where we actually caught the red-eared sliders and the Western pond turtles. So the black is Western pond turtle only, the white is red-eared slider only, and then the half and half is where we caught both of them at. You're not able to see a lot in this image because a lot of stuff is overlapping. So if you look in the kind of northern section, we're getting really only Western pond turtles. We really don't detect a lot of red-eared sliders up there. Around Sacramento, as you may expect, we're getting a lot of red-eared sliders. We are detecting some Western pond turtles, but primarily we get red-eared sliders in that area. And that is very typical with what you see across red-eared sliders across the world. Not just California, not US, they are very much associated with urban areas because that is their source of introduction. People are releasing them and they are where the people are. In the Delta, we kind of have the same sort of thing going on. We have a lot of Western pond turtles in the more rural areas, but then, you know, Antioch, Lodi, near there, we also are detecting red-eared sliders. So this map, I recognize it's very, very difficult to see. It's really small. This map is kind of everything spread out, shifted so that you can see all of the different locations. So we definitely had a lot of areas where we didn't have any turtle detections. And then again, you know, Sacramento being an urban area, you're seeing a lot of red-eared sliders. And, you know, it kind of thins out on the red-eared slider front as you go further north. Oop. Sorry, I'm trying to move my bar. I moved it and I can't get it back now. Here we go. Okay, I'm good. Okay, so this graph, it's not number of turtles. We're looking at number of sites that are occupied. So with Western pond turtles, we found that them in a lot more irrigation canals than we did wetlands. And the red-eared sliders, we found them in a lot more wetlands than we did irrigation canals. It's really flipped. This doesn't necessarily mean that red-eared sliders like wetlands more. It's just, as you saw from that map a while ago, most of the wetlands that we sampled were near Sacramento, and you're just going to get that with urban areas, lots of red-eared sliders. But it definitely is something we want to look into more and research about how red-eared sliders are, you know, prioritizing and using different habitats. Okay, so one thing that we were able to look at was the detection probability. So a single day of trapping. So that is us throwing out 2 traps at a single site, and we're looking at what the likelihood of catching a red-eared slider or a Western pond turtle is with that amount of effort. So we actually found that the detection probability didn't differ between Western pond turtles and red-eared sliders, which pretty cool, makes things a little bit easy for us. So if we put out 2 traps at a site, our chance of detecting a Western pond turtle or red-eared slider, if they are present at that site, is 13% in the Sacramento Valley. In the Delta, we found a little bit higher, 16%, which we think is because our trapping methods differed a little bit between those 2 sites. As I mentioned, in the Delta, we used all sardines and we were able to survey just a wider area, or since our traps didn't have to be as close to test the bait type. So our 10-day trapping estimate, and typically we were at most sites for 10 days. That was our goal, but it did kind of vary between 6 and 13 depending on what the circumstances were, if we needed traps elsewhere, what was going on. But generally, we were most places for 10 days. And with that 10-day trapping effort with 2 traps at a given site in the Sacramento Valley, we estimated a detection probability of 75%, and in the Delta, 83%, which is pretty good. So another thing that we looked at is the occupancy. So we looked at how many turtles that we captured in an area and estimated how many sites actually had turtles. In wildlife, just because you are trapping and looking for something and not finding it, it definitely doesn't mean it's not there. And there's a lot of reasons that you can not capture turtles if they're at a location. So in the Sacramento Valley, we captured Western pond turtles at 22 of our 116 sites, but we estimated that they were actually at 28 of them. In the Delta, we found them at half, 13 of our 26 sites, but we estimated they were at 16. And overall, we captured Western pond turtles at 35 of our 142 sites, but we estimated that they were actually at 44 of them. So these are a couple interesting things about Western pond turtle occurrence I wanted to share. So we did find that the further away one of our sites was from an urbanized area, the more likely we were to find a Western pond turtle. We had a really strong correlation for this from 0 to 30 kilometers away from an urbanized area, and then not strong after that because we just didn't have as many sites in that area. But that probably doesn't surprise a lot of people. You know, Western pond turtles don't always adapt the best to being around, you know, urbanized areas, and this was interesting. They also do better in wide canals. So we found that the wider a canal was, the more likely it was to find Western pond turtles there. We don't exactly know why. Western pond turtles might like wider canals because wider canals tend to retain water for a longer period in the year, but we're not really sure. So for red-eared slider occupancy, we did the same thing with the Western pond turtles. We looked at where we found them and how many sites we estimated they occurred in. So in Sacramento Valley, we captured them at 25 of 116, but we estimated they're actually at 38. And in the Delta, 5 out of 26, but we estimated they're actually at 11. And overall, we caught them at 30 of our 142 sites, but estimated that they were at 50 of them. And so then a couple interesting things about red-eared slider occurrence that I wanted to share. So we found that the closer you are to an urban area, the more likely a red-eared slider is to be there, which again, that's, you know, not necessarily groundbreaking news, but it's interesting that our data, you know, prove that out. Humans release red-eared sliders, so it makes sense that they're going to be where a lot of people are. And we also found, like I've mentioned, red-eared sliders were a lot more likely to occur in wetlands than they were canals. We don't think this is because wetlands are some sort of, you know, ultra special red-eared slider specialized environment. We think it's just because almost all of our wetlands were really close to Sacramento. Sacramento is where the people are, so it's where the red-eared sliders are. But it's something we definitely want to continue looking into. So all of this research answers some questions, but as with research, it brings up even more questions. So do red-eared sliders negatively impact Western pond turtles? We found that based on this initial research, red-eared slider occupancy did not have any effect on whether we found Western pond turtles there or not, but that definitely doesn't mean, like, we strongly caution that that doesn't mean that red-eared sliders don't impact Western pond turtles. There's a whole lot of different things that can be happening that we need to look into. Our research focused primarily on detection. Are they there? Are they not there? Whereas more in-depth research, like we're working on right now, where you're at a site for longer with more traps really diving in, you can get a better idea of what the populations look like. Do red-eared sliders and Western pond turtles prefer the same habitat? Not really sure. I mean, maybe Western pond turtles just do better in irrigation canals, and that's why they're found in more canals. There's definitely a lot of research to look at with that as well. You know, what else influences that we might not think of where Western pond turtles and red-eared sliders are found? Can we anticipate where they're going to expand? They do very, very well in this area. Odds are they're going to expand more. We've actually found in the last couple years red-eared sliders at some of our giant garter snake sites that we have never found them before, up in, I think, one up in Yolo and one up in Colusa, you know, which is further from, you know, the big urban area of Sacramento. Are they new releases? Are they turtles that are making their way there? We don't really understand. How can habitat be improved to support Western pond turtles? This is a really big thing. So if we find where they're at, is there anything that can be done to existing habitat to kind of promote their well-being more? So these are my references. Definitely would like to acknowledge many private landowners, especially the Natomas Basin Conservancy, for allowing us access to trap on their land. All the many people that make this work and all of our work possible, the crew leaders, technicians, and volunteers, including Anna Jordan, Kristen Fouts, and Daniel Macias. I would like to thank David Germano and Mickey Akoff for their advice as we started our foray into Western pond turtle research. I had a lot of questions, and the marking scheme that I showed earlier was directly from Mickey Akoff, which I really appreciated. Okay, well, thank you very much. And thank you everybody for coming. Like I said, we're going to be sending this out to everybody in a link to a YouTube video. And I'll probably get that out early to mid next week. So thanks again, Alex. Thanks everybody for coming. Really appreciate it. Oh, yeah. One more thing. I'll just mention, this is the last lecture for the year because we've got holidays coming up. The
in November and December, about the same time we would normally have a lecture. So look for Tuleyome Nature and You lectures again starting in January, and you'll all get information about that as we get closer.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming out and for having me. This was fun. And feel free to share my contact information.
Okay, good. Bye. I'm ending the meeting.
Okay, bye-bye.